Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. And we are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hello and welcome everyone to episode 52 of the Porcupine Report. I am, as always, your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the Free State Project, Eric Brakey. Thank you so much for joining us this Wednesday when we are releasing our weekly episode. Every single Wednesday at 7 o'clock p.m. You can find a new episode from us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Spotify, on many of your favorite podcasting apps. Wherever you're consuming this episode, I hope that you will go ahead and like and share and leave a review, or I don't know, with the different platforms, there's different things to do. You know what works for your platform. Just help promote the show, grow our audience. It is a great way, not just to share great liberty content with people who are thirsty for freedom, but also a way for more people to discover the Free State Project and what we're building in New Hampshire. And today's going to be a great episode for that. We're focusing on some really great opportunities right here in the Free State. Before we get to that, though, I want to share a little bit of news. This past Sunday, we had a very, very successful Porcupine Day celebration. So thank you to all who came out to join us at the Rugged Axe in Manchester. We had well over 80 people in attendance. It was a crowded, fun time. Turns out I'm a little bit better at axe throwing than I thought I was going to be. I mean, there were many times I threw the axe and it just bumped against the wall and fell to the ground. But, you know, those moments where you throw the axe and it just kind of lands there right in the right spot and in the target, it's so satisfying anyway. Some of us are better axe throwers than we realized. So thanks to everyone who came out from that. And I'm glad today I've got with me my Porcupine Day 9 new coffee mug. I'm having some nice tea for this interview in my new Porcupine Day mug. Those will be on sale actually at Liberty Forum. So if you missed your opportunity to come to Porcupine Day and get one of these great mugs, when you come out to Liberty Forum, we will plan to have them on sale that you can grab one. I will say also this weekend, because planning and executing your own event is not enough. This weekend, many of us, myself included, are hopping into a van. We're driving down to the Imperial City, Washington, D.C. for LibertyCon, which is being hosted by Students for Liberty. This is going to be a great opportunity. Well, I'm going to have a speaking slot on the main stage to promote the Free State Project, and I'm also getting a lot of interview requests from podcasters who are going to be down there. So great opportunities to promote what we're doing. I'm looking forward to talking to a lot of the students about what we're building here in the Liberty homeland as they start to chart out and look for where they're going to plant their roots as they try to move forward in their young lives. And I will note, of course, now that Porcupine Day is done, we are looking forward to Liberty Forum in April and the Porcupine Freedom Festival in June. Tickets are on sale for both now, and you can look for more announcements from us in the near future about speakers that we are getting booked and locked in for these events right now. Right now, we're very excited at Liberty Forum that we are going to be hosting for the first time at Liberty Forum a Soho Forum debate between myself and Andrew Heaton, former guest on this show, and moderated by the great Gene Epstein. The question of the debate is whether or not libertarians should focus their time and their energies on trying to reform the swamp in Washington, D.C., or to focus on building liberty for real societies closer to home, just like we're doing with the Free State Project in New Hampshire. So that's going to be a fun debate. I hope that you come out. It's going to be an Oxford-style debate, which means people vote going into the debate and then vote at the end of the debate, and you see which way the needle has moved. I think I'm actually going into this at a disadvantage because I imagine at the New Hampshire Liberty Forum, most of the people going into the debate are going to go into it already agreeing with my position that we should focus closer to home on building liberty for real societies. So Andrew Heaton's gonna just have to sway a few people. Anyway, I hope that you'll come out and join us. That will be a lot of fun at Liberty Forum. Tickets on sale now. NHLibertyforum.com. Anyway, that's the news for the Porcupine Report. Let's get to our conversation for today. I'm really excited to welcome to the show someone who hasn't been on the show before, but is someone who I've heard quite a bit about the work that he is doing since I made the move to New Hampshire. His name is Jay Noone. He owns and operates Noone Farm, where they, in addition to raising and processing animals, they have this great homeschooling cooperative that they've been building there. And right now, as Donald Trump talks about, when we all wonder, will he or won't he seek to abolish the federal Department of Education? There's always a lot of hope for what might happen or what could get better on the federal level. But as we all know, what really counts is what we are building here in our own communities to build a more prosperous and free society, because things could get better on the federal level. They might get better on the federal level, but nobody's going to ride in on a white horse and save us. We need to build better institutions for freedom in our own communities. And that's exactly what our guest on today's show is doing. So I want to welcome to the Porcupine Report, Jay Noone of Noone Farm.
Thank you for having me, Eric. And I appreciate what you're doing for the Free State Project and helping this achieve liberty in our lifetime.
Well, I really appreciate it, Jay. I know we were talking before the show, and you told me you've been coming to the Porcupine Freedom Festival since 2007, and
Yes.
You made the move to New Hampshire yourself from Massachusetts in 2016. So it's been 9 years for you. You came the year that we triggered the move. I guess before we get into Noone Farm and kind of what you're building there, I'd love to know more of your personal, mover story. What got you to PorcFest the first time, and over the course of, I guess, 9 years before you made the move, what led you to making the move?
So my brother is Josh Noone at the time. So he's been a musician. He's played probably every PorcFest, multiple Liberty Forums. He's got a lot of original music. I'd always say his genre of music is, Rage Against the Machine in the tune of Bob Seger. And anyways, Josh was playing a Pumpkin Fest in like 2003 or 2004, and Ian Freeman made it a point to go find him because he heard his set, and it was basically a bunch of politically motivated libertarian type music exposing the fraud government and whatnot. And back then, my brother had a band. It was Josh Noone and the Federal Crime. So Ian's like, wow, have you heard of the Free State Project? Have you heard of, and maybe this was 2005 or I don't know what year this was, but but anyway, so my brother's like, oh, that's cool. And him and his girlfriend at the time went up to PorcFest. And then he came home. He's like, he didn't stop talking about this for months. He's like, you got to go to PorcFest. It is they're libertarians, they're anarchists. It's so cool. You got to come. And so then I planned on going to PorcFest, but I had to I have a business. I had a business. I was a hay dealer at the time. I would buy and sell hay. And so I didn't make it like the first year he wanted me to go. And the second year I finally got up there that be the third time he went, I think. And I was like, wow. It was like the first time I was like, I actually had like a little case of like post PorcFest depression going back to Massachusetts back then, and everybody sort of gets that when they leave PorcFest, especially when they've been there the first, when it was the first couple times there. So then I made it a point to pretty much hit PorcFest every year. I missed 2014 and 2015 because I was living in Colorado at the time. And so, I went and took a job in Colorado in 2013, saved up a bunch of money. And the other thing that was really powerful about the Free State Project, or that I liked about the Free Staters, is I was doing a property tax protest in Massachusetts in like 2011, 2012, and the town of Palmer took my house. And on the day of the auction, Ian Freeman and about 50 other Free Staters showed up to protest my auction. They all drove down to Massachusetts, which was pretty cool. And so it was like, wow, I really want to be in New Hampshire if this is the kind of support I'm going to have as someone who's a freedom activist. And it's true. If you're a freedom activist in New Hampshire and you go to court and you tell someone about it that has to do with Free State Project or Free Keene or any of these Shire Society, you're going to have the courtroom stacked with people in your support. And I've been in many courtrooms in New Hampshire where it was standing room only in the audience because of the support for whoever's getting, their rights violated by the state. So, yeah, the Free State Project is, part of is a huge reason that I am living the life that I've always dreamed I wanted to live on a homestead, surrounded by, all my neighbors are pretty much libertarian minded. They all carry guns. We live out here in the woods of Henniker, New Hampshire, and just even like within a 5-minute drive from my house, there's multiple Free Staters. There's probably, I want to say, maybe 30 or 40 people within a 10-minute drive from my house that are moved here for the Free State Project. Like, you got Lily Tang Williams is one of my neighbors, for example. We got all kinds of people in Ware, people in Hillsborough, and Concord's not real far away from where I am, but there's just a lot of places, a lot of Free Staters around here. And that's getting more and more common here in New Hampshire. Almost anywhere you move, you're within 20 minutes of a bunch of Free Staters.
Yeah, it's one of the questions I get a lot when I'm when I'm introducing the Free State Project on podcasts. People ask me, like, is there like a particular city that all the Free Staters kind of live in? And it's like, no, like literally we're spread out. We're everywhere. I mean, I think it's a big part of why you don't see, like, you get, even you look at like representation in the legislature, right? You don't see like, just one region where there are libertarians elected from. Like, people are getting elected all across the state. And it's been encouraging for me as I've been touring around, just to know that, like, any community you go to, there's different flavors and different kind of cultures and tribes within the Free State movement. But there are Free State communities everywhere you go in New Hampshire. That's been very encouraging. What for those who maybe are outside the state of New Hampshire and are considering kind of making a move and they're looking at different regions, what can you tell people about kind of the region in New Hampshire that you landed in and where you've built your life?
So my original intention when I left Colorado was to go buy some land off of this guy, Bob Hull, who was a state representative. He passed away now. This was almost 10 years ago. And I was in talks with him about buying some land off him in Grafton. So I went and checked out Grafton a few times, and Grafton's pretty sparsely populated. There's no zoning in Grafton. You can pretty much do whatever you want up there, but there's just not much going on. Actually, there's a lot more going on now in Grafton than there was, because there's just more people here now, and a lot have moved up there. And so I ended up moving in with Mark Edge over at his property, and I was going to do a deal to buy his property. And then I was at the Quill, and I met this guy, Rick Humboldt. I don't know if you ever met Ricky. He passed away a couple years ago, but Ricky built a pair of geodesic domes here in Henniker, and he had some health issues, and he was looking to get out of the property, and he's like, no, come on over, check my place out, and I want to, whatever, I'll rent to you, I want to sell to you. And I got here, and he's like, I'm like, I can't afford that place. And so anyways, I rented a spot from him for some of my equipment. We were living in Manchester. My wife, Shallon, she had an apartment there, so I was living with her. And then another very good friend of mine, Neil Smith, Bardo Farm, a guy who I give probably the most amount of credit to for helping me get to where I am here in New Hampshire. He was been very good friends with Rick for years, dozen years or so, maybe ever since Neil's been here for over 15 years. He's a very early mover, Neil and Emily. And so Neil's like, and I'd been helping out Neil with some stuff. I come from an agricultural background, and so I'm a mechanic, and I was helping Neil fix a lot of things around his place. So Neil sort of brokered a deal for me to buy this place off of Rick. It was a property that was kind of special. It wouldn't get a bank mortgage, so you're not getting a big money for it. Rick financed it to me. I gave him some money down. It worked out very well. So this is a nice private piece of property. You can't even see it from the road. We got a dozen acres here. We're surrounded by hundreds of acres of basically nothing. I have one neighbor that's like right next to me, and then all my other neighbors are pretty far away. It takes you like 15 minutes to walk to the next neighbor's house through the woods. If in good conditions, it'd take me probably 25 minutes to walk there in the snow now. But anyways, so it's it's hot and humid in the summer, and it's cold in the winter. It's the way it's supposed to be. But that's what makes tough people. That's what makes your people who don't need government is cold weather in the wintertime. And the thing with New Hampshire is pretty much everyone who grew up in this Arcadia region, which is like New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, Eastern New York, Western Massachusetts, is you got to work hard, or you're not, all summer long, or you're not going to survive the winter. Now, nobody's had to really work hard for, a couple generations, but, that's the way it was, for a long time. So my neighbors are all rugged individualists pretty much. And, they've all been living here for, a couple of them are, people who left Massachusetts like I did, who for very similar reasons. But most of my neighbors have been here for generations. And most of them very much, support what I'm doing. So yeah, so when my daughter Cypress we bought the place here, I believe in 2018, or we got married at Porkfest in 2018, Shallon and I. We actually met at Porkfest in 2012 and in 2013 and 2014, I think it was, we met there. I might have those years a little messed up, but we got married, and then right after we got married, Ricky Humboldt was at our wedding. He's like, I don't care what I got to do to make this work. You guys, I really want you guys to have my home. And so yeah, we've been here. My daughter Cypress was born February of 2020, and before I actually moved to New Hampshire, I worked in Colorado on a big farm operation. They were using all the Monsanto genetics and all the nasty chemicals. And it was actually a job I really, really enjoyed. We farmed like 3,500 acres, ran all this huge farm equipment. It was a lot of fun for, kind of a redneck, farm kid like myself. But everybody I worked with was like chronically sick. And I was also pretty much aware, the girl I was dating at the time, not my wife, a different girl, was very hip and into like what was going on with like all the Roundup and the chemicals. And so I decided to quit that job early and move to New Hampshire. I originally was going to do it for 5 years. I only did that job for 3. And so yeah, we're here. Cypress is born, and I didn't have any interest in being a farmer whatsoever until Cypress was born. And the reason I didn't want to be a farmer, because the only way you can really make any kind of money, a good living farming, is to essentially be a welfare recipient as a farmer. Collect all the government subsidies, fill out all the paperwork, just be a welfare recipient is the bottom line. So a hardworking welfare recipient, put it that way. So, but when I was holding Cypress in the hospital, and at the same time, having some text message conversation with Neil Smith about how he sold out of all of his meat, because this is during the scamdemic, the shutdowns. So he sold out of all of his meat. He's trying to buy pigs, all kind. He can't. It takes a while to raise up some pigs to harvest. And we're trying to find. We're trying to find guys to buy pigs from. And I'm working on talking to guys in Indiana, talking to guys in Pennsylvania, New York, and they're all like, "Oh yeah, we got nowhere to send the pigs. Come get them. They're very cheap." One guy's like, "I'll just give them to you. Just show up here." And all these guys when it came time to actually going over there and getting the pigs, they're like, nope, we have to euthanize them. I'm going to get, I won't collect the insurance. If I sell them to you or give them to you, I'll get sued by Tyson. I'll get, all this stuff.
Can I ask just for yep. clarification? So this is going on during COVID, and maybe there were just so many crazy things going on at the time, and maybe my mind forgets certain things. But what was going on with there were government policies that were causing people to euthanize their yep. animals? What was going on there?
So what happened is they shut down the packing plants.
Yeah.
And they said everybody had to be tested. Everybody had to wear a mask, this, that, and the other thing. So the packing plants, if you've ever been in the packing plant, anybody who's doing any actual real work doesn't speak any English whatsoever. That's the bottom line. So when government officials show up to test people for COVID, the people who are there, you got guys that don't speak English. They're from El Salvador, and their name is Kevin Smith on their ID. They're all working with stolen IDs. They're all so they're very concerned. And this is the same thing with all the big agricultural operations I was working on in Colorado and stuff and dealing with it. I got this hat that said ICE on it. It looked like an immigration customs whatever hat. And my stepfather, he's like, what are you doing with that? I go, I'm going to go. I was going to put this on when I go over to the big feedlot today and see what happened. He goes, and he freaked out. He goes, don't do that. Those guys will run off. They won't be at work for 4 or 5 days. You can't mess around like that. And I was like, oh, okay. I just thought I was going to have some fun, And so anyways, when like 2 or 3% or 5% of the workers don't show up at the slaughterhouse that processes 20,000 pigs a day or 10,000 cows a day, that operation basically comes to a standstill. So what was happening is they had cattle that they couldn't sell. They had pigs they couldn't sell. They had chickens they couldn't sell and process. And basically what happens with like the pigs, for example, when they get over a certain weight, the big slaughterhouses don't want them anymore. So it's like you just can't like stop feeding pigs that, they'll die, and they don't want them after a certain age. And also in the commercial factory farmed pork is the other white meat pig farming. Those pigs, if they get too old, they get really, really sick because they're getting all synthetic food. They're getting all GMO food. They're being fed corn. They're not on dirt. Like Bardo Farm in here, the pigs are basically raised on forest, which they need. That's why the pig meat, that pork that comes from Bardo Farm and like any other, pasture raised pigs is very red, because there's a lot of iron in our New Hampshire dirt. We've got a lot of red clay here in New Hampshire. It's actually good forest ground for raising pigs. So anyways, the slaughterhouses have stopped operating. And then these processors or these farmers are raising like 4,000 hogs inside like a 6-acre barn, concrete floor. They never get real sunlight. And they end up got nowhere to go with these hogs. And because they're all government subsidized, they have federal crop insurance programs, federal pork, beef insurance, all this garbage that shouldn't exist. They're like, okay, we're just going to, fill this hog barn with gas, and we're going to kill all these hogs. And then we're going to go, take the D9 and cut a big trench in the dirt outside and throw them in a hole and compost them. So that's what these guys had to do. So I was literally trying to get like pigs. I couldn't find pigs anywhere, and that I could go get, like, because all these guys, nobody was allowed to like do anything with these pigs. So I finally get a hold of a guy in through I don't even know how this happened. Just the stars lining up for us. This guy calls me out of the blue. I haven't talked to in 20 some odd years. He's like, "Is this Jay?" I'm like, "Yeah, who's this?" And he tells me who he is, and I remember him. And Phil Lamb's the guy's name. He's like, "Hey," he goes, "I heard you're looking to buy some pigs, that you got a place to go with them." He's like, "There's this farm over here in Western Massachusetts. The guy can't he can't move his pigs out of there. He's got no one to butcher them." So we went down there, and Neil and I bought all these pigs off this guy, and we brought them home and fed them for some weeks. And we at the time had also been working on the other hand with building some new relationships with some new slaughterhouse, small family run slaughterhouse that we started using. So we were able to like just somehow get this like pig thing just happening. We bought pigs, we fed them, we had to feed, we set up the butchering, and we got it all done. And we were back right to, providing pork, and then we did the same thing with some beef. So we got all that stuff rolling with Bardo Farm. It was a really good time. We learned a lot, but I didn't actually want to be a farmer. I kind of liked being a livestock trader kind of guy, that is like a low risk thing. And, and it's, and I'm able to do it without being subsidized. But when I was holding Cypress, she's a couple of days old, I'm like I can't stop thinking about all the things that I can now do with this child to basically encourage her to be useful, competent, and valuable. And so I grew up on a farm. I'm the oldest of 6 kids. My mom and dad are divorced, but I got a couple of half brothers and a half sister and 1 full brother. And we grew up on a horse farm. So my dad was a super kind guy. Spud Noone was his name. He passed away about a dozen years ago. But we lived in a big house, and we always had some other kids living with us because home life sucked, because they were runaways, because, whatever the situation was. One kid that lived with us often, he was like a middle child of like 7 kids, parents are divorced. And he's like, I'm just going to stay with you guys. We're like, cool. And he did for a while. So my dad was always taking in kids, but he was always putting them to work. And Eric, do you have any kids?
Not yet.
Okay. So anyone who has kids and has raised dogs or raised horses or trained dogs will kind of understand that at a certain point, kids are basically like a really smart dog. And if you have a really smart dog, like a heeler or a Jack Russell, and they're high energy, even a border collies are usually pretty mellow. They're pretty easy to deal with. But like these high energy, smart dogs, if you don't give them a job, they just start doing bad things. They start tearing stuff up. They start biting at people, especially like the working cattle dogs, like the Australian blue heeler. If they don't have a job to do, they get extremely aggressive. They misbehave, and now they become dangerous and lethal. And so like when you see a blue heeler and you got toddlers, like you don't put those kids on the ground until like you figure out whether that dog got a job or not. The dog has a job. He don't care about the kids. If you don't have a job, he's going to terrorize the kids. And I show up to these farms and see these healers all over the place, and most of them are pretty good. So my thought is I basically just need to put my kids to work. That's what my dad did to me when I was a little kid. He put us to work. Well, there's a lot of work a kid can do on a homestead and or a farm or a ranch, or if you're an entrepreneur and you have a business, you can totally put your kids to work. So Cypress's first job that she decided that she was going to do was when she was 8 months old, and it was collecting the eggs. So I had a front carrier, and I'm carrying around the front carrier, and I'm out. I made this chicken. Well, there was a chicken coop here, and I kind of modified it so it would be like toddler friendly. That was my plan. I want the kids to be able to like deal with the chickens. So I open up the door to chicken coop like I do every day with her on the front carrier. And I just grab the eggs out of the nesting boxes, and I'm putting them in the egg cart. And then one day she just grabs an egg, takes the first egg, puts it in the egg cart, and takes a second egg and just smashes it right on top of the first egg. And so I had to just keep on moving the eggs that she was putting in, because she just kept on putting them in the same hole in the egg cart in the same spot. And then, she's talking, I don't know, she's 13, 14 months old, and she counts to 12. Like maybe she's 18 months old. I don't know. I'd have to look the date on the video, but she counts to 12. And then when she gets to 12, she starts at 1 again. Well, every time that I was putting eggs in the egg carton, I'm counting them. And then, sometimes we get collecting like, 18 or 25 eggs a day. Sometimes you're collecting 8 eggs a day, like right now, we're just collecting a couple eggs. So she's counting to 12. And well, 12 is a really good basis for, the SAE measuring system and weights and measures and things like that. So that's cool. And but it's just so then it got to the point to where if I'm going outside to do something, she's throwing a fit unless she's coming with me, whether it's, you know, riding around in the backhoe to like feed animals. But anyways, that spring of 2020, I went and I bought 250 piglets, and I put an ad on Craigslist. Piglets for sale, $150 cash, $100 if you pay in bullion, Bitcoin, or bullets. So I got a lot of people to buy Bitcoin in 2020 to buy pigs, and they had some change left over when they bought their Bitcoin, and they're very happy about that now. I acquired a lot of bullets by trading Bitcoin for pigs. I got paid a little bit of silver and a little bit of gold back. Well, that's another beautiful thing here in New Hampshire. Like pretty much all the meat I sell, I get paid in gold backs, silver. One guy always pays me in Dash. Other people pay me in Bitcoin. Other people, you know, they want to pay in Monero, which is a lot of fun. And my kids are right there as part of the transactions. Both of my kids right now, Cypress will be 5 in a couple weeks. Cash, my son Cash is 3. They know how to operate the 2 scales we got. We got a digital scale. We got an old little platform scale with like the needle on it. And they know how to weigh things. They understand numbers. I got we're constantly doing math and multiplication. Cypress is at not even 5, and she's literally doing 1st and 2nd grade math, like very accurately. And which is, you know, we're doing 1st and 2nd grade math every day, and we're just calculating stuff. I mix it and grind my own feed for all the animals. So we're like weighing out. I got a big platform scale. I like, you know, put like 50 pounds of this kind of grain on it, and a couple pounds of these minerals, and a few pounds of this salt, and goes through the grinder and mix it up. And so the kids, they participate in all that stuff with me. But the thing is kids really need a job. And, you know, sending your kid to daycare so they can be lobotomized by an iPad, and, you know, some employee at the daycare that got their credentials from a woke, liberal university, you know, is not a job for the kids. In fact, it's just, you know, it's daycare. It's essentially, you know, a very comfortable, you know, prison that the kids can't leave for the day. And obviously, you know, they're little kids. They need someone to watch them. But the idea is on the homestead, we're just developing skills. Like, you know, as soon as these kids are old enough to crawl, they're in the gardens picking weeds with us. And sometimes they rip out, you know, some of the good crops, but well, whatever, that's not a big deal. We have in our homeschool co-op, you know, last summer, so we've been doing the homeschool co-op. This past summer would be our 3rd year of doing our homeschool co-op. So we've had, and I've just basically invite my friends to it. And all my friends are libertarians and anarchists. One thing I'm really proud about with our homeschool co-op, all the families that show up, the moms and dads are together. The kids are not vaccinated. The kids are not going into the public school system, and they are super, super eager to come to homeschool co-op. So the you know, 7-month-old, 8-month-old baby that's crawling around on the ground, the moms just put them on the ground in the garden because the moms are helping out and doing stuff, and the kids are just there watching us do it. So whatever we're actually doing is what the kids are going to do and want to do. The kids they don't listen to us. They're not going to do what we tell them to do. And we just have to set the example by doing. So if we're sitting there looking at a tablet or a smartphone, you know, most of the time, 9 hours a day or whatever, you know, is what the average, according to the NIH in 2021, there's a study that the average 3 to 9 year old is using an internet device 9 hours a day, and 13 to 19 year old is using an internet device 11 hours a day, according to this study, which is pretty insane. But this is also a study from like apps that are like for kids that they're getting the data from. Like my kids don't do any of that stuff. In fact, my homeschool kids, another thing with my homeschool kids, none of them are devicing, which is really awesome. So they're attentive, they're interested in it. And when their moms or their dads, so we got mostly like 8 80% of who shows up to homeschool co-op is the moms, and we have a couple dads that show up also. So the kids just want to do whatever we're doing, and the littler kids want to do what the bigger kids are doing. So we got like one of the older kids, she's like 12 now, and her parents have done a fabulous job with her. So we actually had her running an excavator a little bit last summer. She wanted to drive a tractor around, let her go do stuff with the tractor at like 11 years old. And so the kids really look up to her, and she's like really good at, cleaning the chicken coop. So you got, the Kaufman boys, Rachel Goldsmith's sons. They are 7, 5, and I think one of them just turned 4. Well, a 7 and 5-year-old, like they're very excited to come here. Well, they're all excited to come here, but when they show up here and they're like, Farmer Jay, I'm ready to shovel pig poop. So we go in the pig pen and, with the wheelbarrow and stuff, or set the tractor bucket over the fence and shovel out pitchfork pig poop into the pig pen, clean things around, spread out some bedding hay. But these kids, by the time they're 5, they can totally clean out the whole chicken coop all by themselves and do a perfect job. Put the bedding back in the chicken coop, clean the feeders out if they're a little dirty, put them back in, clean the waterers out. I teach them how to scrub the waterers out. Same thing with like the water buckets for the pigs or the cows. And even other things like with just, animal husbandry, we'll walk around in my cow pasture, and we'll take sticks and we'll take the cow poop and or with your muck boots, kick it around, and we'll examine it. And we'll find beetles and bugs and larvae and undigested feed. And I got all these kids identifying, oh, that's a piece of corn, that's barley, oh, what's that one? Well, we gave them some rolled oats. That's a, part of a rolled oat or whatever, that's in it. Like, and these are things as a farmer you want to do to make sure like stuff's all getting digested and whatnot. And do we need to grind the feed a little bit or whatever? So they just, and the thing I've noticed about, comparing the kid to the smart dog that has a job to do, minds well. That's the kind of dog when people show up to your farm and they see how good your dog is, they're like, I give you $2,000 for that dog right now. There was so many times we always had Australian heelers growing up, and my dad we were really good about giving them jobs, these dogs jobs. And multiple times, 20, 30 years ago, we get offered $2,000, $3,000, $4,000. Even a couple dogs, we sold them. One guy comes back and goes, I'll give you $5,000 for that dog. My dad's like, well, we got to sell that dog. $5,000 is a lot of money for a dog because it did the job so well. So it makes them valuable. Now, I'm not saying that we should be like, raising our kids so they have a high market value so we can sell them, but we should be raising them so they have a high market value. So when they're in the world doing their thing, whether it's, what it's been for our entire life, which has been just abundance. We've lived a life of abundance. But with the ebb and flows, we could see, the world of Mad Max at some point. And
nothing good lasts forever.
What's that?
Nothing good lasts forever.
Right. So if you have a high value in the marketplace, whether it's abundance or it's Mad Max, you're going to be all right. You're going to be able to not only survive, but you'll also be able to thrive. So when it comes to putting kids to work in child labor, I am very, very supportive of that. And I for years, I've done a lot of business with Amish families. In fact, when I was a little kid, I went and spent a couple of weeks on an Amish farm. And actually, I used to say it was in Pennsylvania. It was actually upstate New York, but I was a little kid, so I thought it was in Pennsylvania. But my uncle corrected me a while ago when he heard me talk about that. He goes, "No, that was up in Palatine Bridge, New York. It was." Oh, okay, whatever. But anyways, so I spent a couple of weeks, about 2 weeks up on that guy's farm. I was like 9 or 10, and that was cool. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. But all of these Amish guys, they're skillful, they're handy, they're healthy. You see all these old Amish dudes at when you go to New Holland, Pennsylvania to this auction, and you start talking to these guys, and how old are you? Oh, I'm 84. and like this guy's running around like he's 55, 84, I mean, he's all gray beard, all gray hair, old man. And, but he's like super, they're healthy, but they work and they like to work and they love to work. So, weeding the garden, picking the egg, getting the eggs out of the chicken coop, feeding the chickens, feeding rabbits, cleaning the rabbit cages out. These are all stuff that like toddlers can do. And even babies can even literally do it. They can come in the garden with you and just start ripping up weeds and playing in the dirt and stuff. It's all the same thing. And the thing is, what it does, what all this farming is like, I got a little video of Cypress picking up, getting eggs out of the chicken coop. And when we open the chicken coop up and she's in the front carrier, she sees all these eggs in the nesting box and she just starts wiggling around, getting a big smile and laughing. Kind of like when you let a child of similar age that's addicted to the internet device have his tablet. They get all happy and they get they're anticipating dopamine hit. So the dopamine hit comes, for her from, getting these eggs because it's just fun to her to do. Is how I programmed her to get a dopamine hit was from collecting the eggs and feeding the chickens. And I'll tell you, one of the funnest things kids can do is we would get I got like a couple of years when I had all those pigs, I got like 25 tons. I got a whole semi-tractor trailer truck load of rejected yogurt, and it was all in 1 quart containers. So it took me like 3 years to feed it out. It's amazing how long yogurt will stay for, when it's frozen half the year. But anyways, getting the kids to open up those yogurts and feed them out to the pigs, like the pigs are just loving it. They love eating, anything, but especially like yogurt and things like that. And it's so everybody's getting a dopamine hit all the way around. A 2-year-old kid is, the pigs are, and it's just fun for them. And the funnest things was feeding the pigs, but also like even when they're 6-7 months old and I got a scoop of grain in my hand and she's in the front carrier and I'm letting her just throw the grain all over the ground and the chickens are running around just pecking up all the grain. She's just, Cypress is just loving it. So I did a bunch of research, heavy duty research on essentially why people are like drug addicts, why people are like basically being 20 years old and they're trying to get on disability because they have no motivation in life. And what it comes down to is how the brain is wired essentially before the child is 6 months old. I'm sorry, 6 years old. 95% of brain development happens within the first 6 years of life. And what most of that brain development is the frontal lobe becoming wired to the rest of the brain. So when a kid is on an internet device, the frequency of the time, the part of the brain that's being stimulated is called the amygdala. Well, the amygdala is also the part of the brain that likes sex, drugs, violence. They're very much stimulated by like heroin and, things like that. And so as the frontal neurological pathways are being created between the frontal lobe and the rest of the brain, if they're being hardwired to the amygdala, now that brain is basically, wired to like, desire, essentially, the internet device, the sex, the drugs, and the violence. And also the other thing that happens is when that brain is incorrectly wired because the kid's been on an internet device, the amygdala is the part of the brain that becomes stimulated during rage. So when the frontal lobe, like so now the kid's like, 18 years old in college, has a bunch of piercings and blue hair, and was raised by Google and public school system. And you ask them something like, hey, can you explain, how there's more than 2 genders? And the frontal lobe kicks on because now they got to come up with an answer. And when that frontal lobe is being activated to say, provide an answer and is wired to the amygdala, it turns on the rage emotion in the brain. And so I believe this is why we had, the summer of 2020, where we had a bunch of people who were just mentally ill, who were raised by Google and school systems, public school systems, that just went into this absolute fit of rage. And we still have a lot of those people who are around it, their reaction to a question that they either don't like or can't answer is rage. And I believe that has a tremendous amount of that is internet devices, essentially wiring their brains. Well, what happens when your kid is playing in a sandbox, crawling around in the garden, is 2 years old and chasing the chickens around the yard, which is wicked good exercise, by the way, too, because the chickens can totally outrun the kids, but the kids, they don't care. They're just going to chase those chickens. When they're feeding grain, when Cash is, got a little ratchet in his hand and he's helping me fix something because, I work on cars and he just wants to hang or work on equipment and he wants to hang out with me. So if I'm not like doing anything dangerous, I just let the kids help me out. And so any of these things that the kids are doing, which they've been doing essentially before the internet came out, and before video games, say like, they've been, our parents did and our grandparents did when they were growing up. The part of the brain that's getting stimulated is the basal ganglia region, which is at the base of the brain, which is essentially where like a lot of your sensory, signals come into the brain. That programming of the brain, that wiring of the brain, of the frontal lobe making its neurological pathways to the basal ganglia region, is the reason that we've made it as far as we have, essentially as a species, because we've been able to adapt. We've been able to learn that, you stay away from the saber-toothed tigers and, on and on and on. Well, that's kind of stopped happening a few generations ago with, like I said, most kids that are being raised in urban environments, their parents are on welfare and they're getting government subsidized daycare or government subsidized iPads and stuff for the kids, or even people who are not even on welfare. They're just working corporate cubicle jobs and they're not raising their kids. They're letting someone else raise it. So that's a major issue. So like Mike Rose says, we need to make the trades look sexy again. We also need to make homesteading and farming look sexy again.
Why do you think that there has been, I guess maybe over the last 100 years, this stigma that's been created about children being given work to do, that this idea that the only education that matters, that's valuable, is what happens within the four walls of a classroom, and that and now if you even put the words child and work in the same sentence, people can have a visceral reaction and about that, and think that you're people accuse you. I guess they imagine like you're putting kids into coal mines or something. Even though kids seem to love Minecraft, they seem to yearn for the mines. Maybe they need that. But why do you? I think it's great that you are kind of carving out kind of some of these old ways again. But have you encountered much as you've been kind of building out these programs and giving kids jobs to do on the farm? Have you encountered any of that, or has it been purely positive from folks?
It's been pretty much purely positive, but I don't really tolerate mentally ill people, so I just don't deal with them.
Yeah.
So the thing with like, why has it become anti-child work? Well, there was some issues back in the day where, well, first off, 100 years ago, if you're 27 years old, you got 11 kids, and your wife's pregnant, and it's January, and it was negative 17 degrees outside. You got no insulation in your house. If everybody in that family who is able-bodied, or if anyone in that family who is able-bodied is not pulling their full weight plus doing all they can do, someone's going to die that winter. 150 years ago. Now, so we've become very comfortable. We've become very, lazy, I think. And also, what was it, during the 50s and the 60s, there was a massive infiltration of all of the academic institutions by communists and socialists out of Russia. That was kind of like by Marxists, really. That was like a thing that happened. I don't have all the history on that. Carly Garrick's pretty good on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But so what had happened is we have this academic cult going on. So all of these people who not all of them, but most of the people who have spent their entire brain development life in some kind of institution. So they're being born. The mom tells them, the doctors say, don't breastfeed, give them Infamil, give them Similac. And you don't want to breastfeed or breastfeed only for a short time because you need to, put your kid in daycare so you can go back to your job as an administrator at the local college or the school or whatever government subsidized, industry you're working in. And so the kids are dropped off at daycare, and then they go to kindergarten, and then they go 1st through 12th, and then they're in college. Then they graduate college when they're 26 years old and their brain's already done developing. They are who they are. You're not changing them much. So the people who essentially live that lifestyle and follow that lifestyle, and I think fluoride has a big thing to do with it. You start talking to a lot, especially women. When did you come around to the ideas of liberty? And they're like, oh, I used to live in this city, and then I moved out to this farm. And I'm like, how long were you on the farm? And I was on the farm for a year. And I'm like, so you were drinking city water and then you're on the well water? And I've had this conversation with hundreds of people at PorcFest, Liberty Forum, and Acapulco. And I'm like, yeah, so maybe you got off the fluoride and, your brain was like, was able to work correctly, huh? And people are like, I never thought of that. Or they're like, yeah, I agree with that. It's just kind of a personal theory I have. But so anyways, academia, the academics, for the most part, are extremely cult-like religious to these academics. I mean, and the whole COVID thing with the vaccines and all the nonsense is so, such an eye opener to this, because I got a family member. I love her very much. And she's got a doctorate in psychology, and she just totally believes anybody in a butcher coat that has the word, has a doctorate or any kind of credentials from these universities is 100% correct and accurate. And I'm a racist because I say that you should challenge the science. So there's just been multiple generations of massive indoctrination happening amongst people in Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States, the Five Eye nations mostly. And so I think that it's been this, progressive boiling of the frog that we have been experiencing for, generations now is really where it comes from.
Well, we're coming up at the end of the hour, but I know, as you've mentioned, you are at PorcFest pretty much every year,
Yep,
for the most part, and usually people can find you doing blacksmithing demonstrations. Is that
correct.
right? So,
yeah. Not only do I do demonstrations, is I let kids. So if you're 6 years old or older, or if you're a really special 5-year-old, we've got a couple 5-year-olds do it. Warner Kaufman, Jeremy Kaufman's son's awesome kid, super smart. All his kids are sharp. He was blacksmithing at 5. But the 6-year-old, their frontal lobe's wired. They understand that glowing piece of metal can burn the hell out of them. So they're really good at it. So I have them forge an iron coat hook or 2 or 3 iron coat hooks. Eric, if you want to do some blacksmithing at PorcFest, you could forge yourself, 6 or 7 coat hooks in probably 25 minutes. Take you 8 minutes to do the first one, and then 3 or 4 to do each additional one. But it's just
I'd love to do that, but I'm worried I get shown up by a bunch of kids.
That's okay. Just be humble about it. and that's the thing too is the kids, especially the homeschool kids, I noticed between 6 and 13 years old, those kids are so easy to get them to forge the coat hook to do all the work. And I can tell I've said to a handful of parents at PorcFest, I'm like, you let him use an internet device, don't you? And you could just see the horror on their face. They're like, oh my God, he can tell. And, so I'm like, yeah, he's got TikTok brain, and actually PorcFest is a really good time to de-device with your kids. don't bring in that stuff to Pork Fest. There's no need for it. There's a whole bunch of other kids there to wear them out and play with. And then when you get home, there's no Wi-Fi. There's no tablet. There's no whatever. And actually, a lot of families have done that sort of, on my advice that have come to Pork Fest. But yeah, so we'll do blacksmithing. And then at my homeschool co-op where kids are butchering chickens with moms, this year we killed and butchered 2 pigs right here at my place with the homeschool co-op moms. And then we cut and packed all the meat, right in our kitchen with the kids and the moms. And, some of the family took some of the pork home and some of the chicken home. And so, yeah, I got 7-year-old kid, 8-year-old kids right now that, they haven't slit a throat on a chicken, but you give them a chicken that's plucked and they can totally, do all the gutting and do a good job. And kids with their little hands, when you got like those heritage chickens that are only 3.5 pounds, like I can't fit my hand in one of those chickens to pull the guts out. My daughter does it like a pro, and little fingers, you can get all the lung flesh out of between the ribs that are in the chickens, and the kids pull it out. And so like that's kind of work kids should be doing. And then when we're pull a chicken out of the freezer, Cypress is like, I gutted that chicken. I cut them with the knife, and
you get to have a sense of pride about it.
Oh, very. And same thing when it comes to making a coat hook. Like I always recommend that when the kids forge a coat hook, that they forge 2. So they forge one that they can put on the wall and hang their coat on, and then the other one they can carry around in their pocket and show all their friends. Because that was what I started noticing is like, I'm like, hey, have you hung up your coat hook? I said to one of the kids once. He goes, nope, it's right here. And he shows it to me. And it was like 3 months later. And he goes to a Montessori school at the time. And his mom, and then he just like runs off. I don't know where we were. And then his mom goes, yeah, he doesn't want to hang it up in his room because he wants to show it to all his friends. and that's what builds confidence.
Yeah.
And just confidence is the opposite of fear. The reason COVID was able to get out of hand by the tyrants that pushed it is because the fear button is just ready to be triggered in so many Americans. And if you have the confidence of a 6-year-old that has forged an iron coat hook, that has pulled guts out of a chicken and then enjoyed eating those chicken wings with all of his buddies at Pork Fest, that kid doesn't have a fear button. And it never even gets programmed to where it can't even be turned on.
It's an awesome lesson for us to all internalize, because I think you're absolutely right. COVID was fear is the mind killer, and all of these opportunistic politicians and bureaucrats used our fear to completely rewire society. And maybe if there were more competent adults, we wouldn't have allowed that to happen.
Correct. Well, so I think it's really hard to put confidence into somebody who's already programmed to be afeared all the time. And the political class, the tyrants, they don't want competent people. What they want is they want people who are afraid, people who are concerned about their loved ones being hooked on opiates. They want people sick with some kind of disease, because all these classes of people who are concerned about, like RFK says, if you have a chronic disease or disability, you have one dream. But if you're healthy, you have thousands of dreams. And so healthy, confident people within those thousands of dreams are included are generally a dream of liberty, which means scrutinizing and looking at and exposing and calling out crooked politicians. So this is why crooked politicians want fentanyl, want heroin, they want cancer, and they want you to be constantly afeared of something. And so, yeah, Ernie Hancock tells me that I'm probably a public enemy #1 when it comes to the deep state, because what I really want people to do is just what I'm doing. So so get a couple rabbits or a couple chickens, and you can do all this stuff and build confidence in your kids. If you're a tradesman, there's a lot of guys, in the past couple of years that are my age, I got an anvil, or in the past couple of decades, because of like Forged in Fire and all these like type of blacksmithing things that became a little popular. A whole bunch of guys that got an anvil and a forge in their garage, and they should be pulling that thing out and letting the kids in the neighborhood, forge some iron and do some work. and what that's going to do in your neighborhood, you're going to have a lot of, what's your neighborhood going to be if you got a bunch of competent kids, in 15 years, living in that neighborhood? It's going to be a pretty secure, safe neighborhood, and people aren't going to be afraid.
Awesome. Well, we're at the end of the show. Any quick final words you want to share with folks? Where can people learn more about what you're doing?
So I have a website. It's jnoone.com. Oh, I got a crying child coming upstairs. Cypress, hold on, honey. I'm doing something. I have a website, jnoone.com, jaynoone.com. It's got some old Pork Fest stuff on it. I haven't updated it, but the Cypress, come on. She got her necklace broken. So anyways, and I'll be at Pork Fest. I'll likely be at Liberty Forum. I'm going to Anarchapulco. Anarchapulco is an event down in Acapulco, Mexico. It's a lot of fun. You can check that out, anarchapulco.com. It's kind of an expensive one to get to, but anyways, I got a contact there. Email is jay@jnoone.com. And if you're interested, what I'd really like to start doing is encouraging people and consulting people on sort of setting up their own man camp or homeschool co-op. I call my curriculum Man Camp. And if you wanted to contact me at jay@jnoone.com and looking for a little help with that, as what I'd really like to be doing, because there's only so much I can do. My homeschool co-op is sort of is pretty good. I got like enough going on here, but I would really like to encourage other people to just start giving essentially kids, children in your neighborhood, something to do to earn the dopamine hit from doing something productive. So when they do grow up to be old enough to have children, they will be, useful, competent, and productive, and have value. And we want our children to have value because they're going to have a good life. It's the bottom line if they have value.
Awesome. Jay, thank you so much for coming on the show. I look forward to seeing you again at Pork Fest, and I'll definitely want to stop by and make some coat hooks.
Nice.
Maybe I'll have to make two so I can brag to all my friends about my my coat hook. So thank you, Jay.
All right.
All right, everyone. That's the show. Thank you again to our guest, Jay Noone, for coming on and for being a valued participant in the Free State Project these last 9 years. And we look forward to having him back at Pork Fest. And I really hope that we have you, our audience, joining us for Pork Fest as well. The theme for this year is Taste the Revolution. We are really looking to highlight a lot of the great folks who are doing a lot with food freedom and homesteading here in New Hampshire. So tickets are on sale for that right now. We've got some great guests that we have just signed on, some great speakers who you'll be excited to hear about, but we're not quite ready to announce them just yet. So you're going to want to keep your ears open for that. And in the meanwhile, furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.